Gilgaboo, Gilgaboo, Gilgaboo.
As Gilgaboo the Jarrow, as Falch Eru, gus Goll as Gaccan.
Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
As an Emsha ons Gilg, be a Gial faster Jula Shall and Greenach as Frasnagev is Troben the Caten Fully. Be Gia near Meanach on lesh and temperature smooth Queg Celsius Jag. Be a Cherum Sanasta Beg Houds Vissen Visna Frassen Slow Chail Beggin a Vegan as be a Cherum Nach la Shall and New Vargelach. Be Gia near as Fast na Meanach on as in temperature slew Jai Celsius and Rate. Be a Cherum as Gial Satajak Merach. Och higga the ve Vargelach cara vora roshma vis flia chitrish sanasta vis troben as be shia flia on the samma sanasta as sanasta beg. Ni an hier chin der the hitva in jas na shia as nyataga gus bjorn and yatel temperature smooth care Celsius jag. Ni an flia vis foson egen vaderen gemert slow chail the gerrid as esh being le a man chirum le shell and greenach chitrish ni and near hui meanach the bjor ludica gus fes as kerkliach as being temporalus roshed and she jeg na shark jeg Celsius egen hood share irina grania 3-minute jeg rish queg merach as line a grania devin a jeg roast jai jew. And we'll have all of that in English with Stephen Miller. Fast am I, Stephen?
Hello there. Do you want me to read this through? The subtle highlights. Okay, this afternoon will be bright with sunny spells and scattered showers, which may turn heavy at times, becoming dry this evening as the showers gradually die away, leaving the night dry with clear spells. And the outlook tomorrow will start dry and bright, but it will turn cloudy during the morning before rain arrives in the afternoon, becoming persistent and heavy late afternoon and early evening.
Yendasak, Guramayu. So yes, we have Stephen Miller with us as a special guest on today's programme. We'll hear more from Stephen after the first piece of music. But if you want to text in and ask any questions about Manx folklore, Stephen is the man to provide the answers. So yes.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate. Gullas Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
I won't be blinded by the light.
And there we go. That's Juice Newton, Angel of the Morning. Juice Newton. Apparently, Judith K. Newton was the lady's name. And that's a song from 1981. So, Stephen Miller, are you a Juice Newton fan?
Can't say that I am.
But what you are, of course, is well, I don't know, what would you describe yourself as? Quite
simply a folklorist.
Well, it's great to have you on the programme. I know we've had you on before, and we're going to hear from you about what you've been up to since we last spoke. But on the way in the car, we had a bit of a discussion about folklore relating to the TT, and what better time to talk about folklore relating to the TT than the trail end of the TT fortnight. Is there any folklore associated with the TT, or does folklore stop happening after the 19th century?
No, it very much continues on. I mean, the intriguing thing was until recently, I don't know if it still goes on, but you used to see the bikes would go down to the ferry bridge, almost to get some sort of benediction almost from the ferry folk down there. As you know, there's that association of the ferry bridge with mechanical breakdown. If you don't greet the ferry folk, if you don't greet them, as we know, they're not the fairies in the Isle of Man. They are the little people themselves, the little gentry, the Munjavega. And bikes would go down there. You could see that in the newspapers. The bikers turning up for good luck, in effect. Whether that takes place or not, I don't know. But it's so it shows you that folklore does exist in the modern world. It's nothing to do with the rural Isle of Man. It's also there in an urban environment as well.
And well, will we go into the issue of which ferry bridge, or is that too dangerous a topic, do you think?
Well, I think it's something that we have to nail it down once and for all in many particular ways. I mean, I think there's always a very, very different difference between, should we say, a factual base for a belief and what people believe. And I mean, the ferry bridge, which the one that is now marked, and if you ever take the bus down there, we're now exhorted almost to say hello to the ferries. That bridge is only there marked as such since the 1950s. I mean, that is connected with the visit from the Duchess of Kent, and later on by the royal party when they arrived as well. The historic bridge, it's first mentioned not as the ferry bridge, it's mentioned by Hannah Ann Bullock in her book about the Isle of Man, published in 1812, and it's mentioned to be the Devil's Bridge. And associated with satanic happenings if you happen to pass over it at midnight. It's very much where Ballaglonny is now. So it's the bridge that crosses the Santon Burn that is the division between the parishes, and it's mentioned by Cumming then in 1846 as being there, and it's Cumming who gives it its first name as being the ferry bridge, but he gives no folklore with it. So there's nothing associated with it. And then we also then have the bridge that's out at Cueg that people now start saying is the real ferry bridge, and that is only known since the 1860s because it turns up on the Ordnance Survey map, and that's the decade in which the Ordnance Survey was conducted. I think the intriguing thing about both bridges is that they are in fact built in the same year. But in the 1780s, the Isle of Man had this notion that we have to build, instead of building interstate highways as they did in America, we'll build bridges because these are fords, they're dangerous to cross, they're often unpleasant to cross and so on. So we'll build bridges in these particular places. But when you look at classic ferry beliefs, which are well documented not just in the Isle of Man but across the Celtic world and elsewhere as well, the ferry folk are a phenomenon throughout Europe as well. Ferries don't build things. They don't build bridges. They don't live under them. They wouldn't want to live under them because we know that they don't want to live in our world. You know, even as early as the 1720s, when Waldron is here documenting fairy beliefs, he says they flee from us. You know, they don't like our noise. They don't like the ringing of church bells. You know, they move away from us. Although we live in their world, are very much, you know, and they are in our world as well. They would not be connected with a bridge. And I think what happens, the reason why that bridge develops as the ferry bridge, is that it's the ideal spot for a photo opportunity. It's a culvert in engineering terms. It's not a bridge, it's a culvert. And you can't take a photograph where Balaglony itself is. And so what you can do is, that's the idea. But this is what happens when the Duchess of Kent turns up. The royal car, or the car slows down, and these children pop up from the bridge dressed as fairies to actually greet her. And this is then done again the next year. And then thereafter, the signpost goes up, and the rest is, should we say, a folkloric history.
And I guess well, again, first of all, we shouldn't be referring to themselves or the little people as what we have been describing them as, because they don't like to be called by their name. But secondly, I suppose they'd be having a bit of a quandary, because what we kind of know is that they or the mythical creatures like to inhabit boundaries or divisions between two areas. So rivers dividing places would have been a great spot for themselves to be. And then some beggar goes and builds a bridge there, and they're thinking, well, we don't really want the bridge, but we've kind of been here before the bridge, maybe.
Yes, it's a very... I mean, it's very curious to know that the folklore that develops is clearly that of mechanical breakdown. It's not of misfortune. You know that the classic way what the fairies folk teach us is that we have to offer hospitality to each other. We have to be kind to each other. You know, they set the rules by which we should live. And so you notice in the farmhouses where, you know, people would go to bed early. There's a great one when Robinson, who was one of these sort of, you know, 18th century travellers, and he gets benighted one night, and he's put up by his host, and he clearly is hearing fairy beliefs and fairy talk and so on, and they go to bed early. And you see, this is a really good idea that people go to bed early, because it means they can get up early the next day and have a really good day. So you know there's that notion of hospitality for them, putting out clean water, putting out food for them as well. And if we don't do that, then harm comes to us. The fairy bridge, no harm comes to us. You know, the harm doesn't come to you personally. I mean, there are the stories, the ones that Sophia Morrison picked up of the person who is beset by the fairy dogs, gets angry at them, throws a stick at them, and the stick comes right back, and he's lame for the rest of his life. And there's also the person who hears the fairies whistling, and he whistles himself. So because he's a cheeky boy, then he's struck deaf and dumb. And so harm comes to you personally. It's physical harm comes to you. In the case of the fairy bridge, it is literal mechanical harm. But you know, for as many people who say that it's absolute nonsense, there are many people who, as soon as you say that, will always come up with a particular story. Ah, yes, but I know so-and-so who had a puncture, so-and-so who had a breakdown. So it just reinforces itself.
Well, we'll hear a lot more about themselves, the little people, the F word. Dare we mention it during the rest of the programme. But if you have any questions, studio@manxradio.com, or text in 166 177, and Stephen will do his best to provide some answers. Faith Hill is next with The Kiss.
As Manx as a rugby long tail, Manx Radio.
I don't want another heartbreak. I don't need another turn to cry. No, I don't want to learn the hard way. Baby, hello. Oh, no, goodbye. But you got me like a rocket, shooting straight across the sky. It's the way you love me. It's a feeling like this. It's centrifugal motion. It's perpetual bliss. It's that pivotal moment. It's impossible. This kiss, unstoppable. This kiss. Cinderella said to Snow White, how does love get so off course? Oh, all I wanted was a white knight with a good heart, soft touch, fast horse. Ride me off into the sunset, baby, I'm forever yours. It's the way you love me. It's a feeling like this. It's
Avashan
A Gaelg, the Manx Gaelic, Ginian Amera, the mother tongue of Elian Vannin, the Isle of Man.
Avashan
You can catch up with more of Manx Radio's Manx language programmes in the weekly podcast Abershen Rish. Say that again.
Avashan
Shene, that's the one.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
As Manx as a pale sunset, Manx Radio.
Galla's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
It's fast am I. Welcome back. We heard one of those Manx as just before as Manx as the Reggaby longtail. There's a bit of folklore associated with longtails, isn't there? And not just longtails. There was also bunnies and various or long-eared fellas or whatever you want to call them.
This takes us into the world of taboo words, and this is very much amongst the fishing community. You feel that it's often been theorised that because people are at sea where it is a particularly dangerous environment, that they don't particularly like to be reminded to go out the world of sea. As you say, you were talking about liminal areas, you're talking about rivers, and we know that's often where the fairy folk are to be found, in these liminal zones. Well, in many ways, so too is fishing. You know, we are sort of people of the land. We're mortals who live on the land, but we're actually fishing out there at a particular sea. And so things then become, I think, in order to people, it's been thought to sort of control the danger or to give the sense that you're not on the land, that you end up having terms that are tabooed, and normally they are living creatures. As we know, the famous ones, longtails. We know the other famous ones is it the sort of the long-eared fellow, the big-lugged fellow, and so on. And there's that reminiscence, isn't it, of Ned Madrill when he first goes to sea. And he uses one of these, and I think he also taunted the crew as well by using one of the sort of the land name for an animal, and the solution to that was always cold iron. You had to grip cold iron, and that was the way it would actually, so bad luck would not come to the fishing crew. And the only iron they could find was a rivet on the engine, and so he had to grip the rivet with his teeth.
Gosh.
To so the boat could overcome the bad luck.
Yeah. Well, yes, I guess gripping a rivet with your teeth is pretty good reason not to use those terms if nothing else. Well, I think we'll play another piece of music. We've got next up a piece of music called Rielana 2 or Rielana Gis maybe. This is by Marcus O'Murchu, who came to the island probably about 30 odd years ago for what was then termed the Failure Gilgach, now the Chush. And yes, let's have a listen to this. And I should warn you, this is the sort of thing that you would tap your foot to and maybe want a little bit of a jig about the kitchen table. So be warned. And that was Marcus O'Mercu with Reelina G, Reels number 2. Imaginatively titled, perhaps. Anyway, Graham has set the ball rolling and says, am I right in thinking... what he says, actually, whenever on our beloved isle, I always slow down and say hello at Fairy Bridge. Am I right in thinking they are fluent Manx speakers themselves?
Well, according to Edward Farragher, it's the only language they spoke. And he considered the reason why we no longer see them in his particular time, he's talking about the 1890s, the early 1900s, is because we'd stopped speaking Manx. And so why should they have any respect for us, that we will not learn their language and speak their language? And so they were gone. So he's perfectly right. Yes, they spoke Manx.
And the famous final reference to fairies that you were talking to me off air about, Hai Sun Yerin, or Hai for Ireland.
Yes, this is recorded by the Folklife Survey in 1964. That's what someone thought. And I think the intriguing, what lies behind that is that they may well have left the island, but they're still about. Mm-hmm. And so they may come back. And I was on the bus the other day coming back from Port Erin, and you pass a lovely little signpost there saying the Fairy Hill. So it's ready for them if they want to come back. There's a signpost for them. It's in English, unfortunately. Perhaps we need to get that sign. You need to do something about that, Phil.
Yes, indeed.
Get that up in Manx, and so when they come back, if they don't have Google Maps, then they know where to go.
Marvellous. Well, the other thing that Graham asks is to broaden my knowledge in the beautiful Manx language. What is jigging in Manx? Well, rincacha maybe. Which is just basically dancing, or downlin, downson, which is another way of saying dancing. You could say possibly jiggerach, maybe jiggerach. A range of options there, but I guess downlin because effectively jigging, dancing a jig would be dancing. So there we go. Anyway, it's time for this. And that is our cue, first of all, to do a very quick version of the weather forecast. So be a Goll fasta dúla Shellen Grianach as frasna gevas troben na Keaton, be a chirum sanasta beg houdsvis na frasen slow chail begin a vegan, as be a chirum nach, be a chirum as Goll sa tajak merach, och hege the vei bodula caravora roshma vis flia chit rish sanasta vis troben, as be shia flia on na samma sanasta as sanasta beg. Ní an fia vis fós ónig vadran gemert slow chail the gerad as esh be an le a man chirum le shallan grianach chit rish.
And in English, for us mortals, and obviously not for the fairy folk who will not be able to understand this afternoon will be bright with sunny spells and scattered showers, which may turn heavy at times, becoming dry this evening as the showers gradually die away, leaving the night dry with clear spells. Tomorrow will start dry and bright, but it will turn cloudy during the morning before rain arrives in the afternoon, becoming persistent and heavy late afternoon and early evening.
Yindasach. And, of course, this was our cue for a bit of Manx music, and we have, this time, Mech Leah with The Grackle.
Galla's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
And there we are, the Grackle by the mighty MacLear. Now, unfortunately, I didn't give you the warning that you might wish to have a jig about the kitchen table, but hopefully the tables and chairs were already cleared back and from Marcus O'Mercu a little earlier. A Grackle, because I wondered what this was, is in fact a sort of a bird, a little bit like a I don't know, a blackbird, crow, that sort of a thing. A very handsomely coloured thing, anyway. The Waterboys next with The Hole of the Moon. that was The Whole of the Moon by the Waterboys. And Stephen, you were almost tapping your foot to that one.
Indeed, I love the Waterboys, the early Waterboy stuff with Mike Scott, and when they were doing the big music, they were a terrific band.
Yeah. And dancing, of course, was something that themselves, the mythical creatures, the fairies used to enjoy.
Well, this takes us into one of the most intriguing of the fairies. We know we have almost that sort of tripartite figures. Really, we have the Fenodri, who may or may not be. Basically, he is the brownie, the household sprite that is familiar from Scottish folklore. And then, of course, we have themselves as we know, but we also have the Leannan She, and that is the fairy mistress, and is often seen in pairs, sometimes alone. And these are women who have blonde hair, sometimes carrying parasols. I mean, the descriptions of these are very precise. These come from Edward Farragher in many cases, are very precise, but there is a wonderful story of the fairy house, and it's a Balahick, and it's a question of two boys are going home, two farm workers are going home at night, and they decide to go, and they see this wonderfully lit up house, and they think, "Oh, that's what's going." They hear the sound of music, and they go in, and there's dancing going on. And they are dancing away, and one of the boys goes off and dances, and the other boy is thinking, something not quite right here. Then he realises that he's in a fairy house. And then what happens is he goes outside, and his friend who's away there dancing is just dancing away. He goes outside. He takes a leak, shall we say. He sort of relieves himself on the house. And one of the things that the fairy folk have is that they have many taboos. As you know, they don't like iron, they don't like the sound of noise, they don't like religion, but also they don't like urine. And so because he pisses against the house, in effect, house disappears. And that's it. His friend is gone.
Gosh.
7 years and a day later, he's walking by. The house is there. He goes into the house, and he sees his friend is still there dancing, and he taps his friend on the shoulder and says, Come on, we better go. And he says, why? I've only had one dance.
Yeah.
Because there is no time in fairyland. Once you're in fairyland, all notion of time has gone. And he managed to get his friend out. Very rare that people go into fairyland and that people come out of fairyland. Once you're there forever.
And I guess the person in the fairy house wouldn't have aged.
They don't age at all. I mean, Rhys has a story of someone who came back after 5 years from. This is an Andros man who was taken, and that's it. You can just be taken. And often it's usually we talk all the time, and we've been talking about before. It's almost at those liminal times. It's in darkness. You know, the day belongs to us in many ways. The dark hours belong to not just the fairy folk, but also the other creatures as well. Bugans particularly. That's when you meet the Bugans. You don't meet them during the day. You meet them in the evening. You meet them when it's dark. When you see that object in the road that you just think it's a stone or just something, and you kick it, and then suddenly it enlarges, and then comes chasing after you. There's a wonderful case of the trying to shorten the school hours in winter in Patrick, because the children are afraid of going home in the dark, that the Bugan will get them.
Gosh, yeah. Any children listening, I don't think that would work in these days of modern streetlights and motor cars.
No, I mean, this is what has vanished. I think very few of us will really experience what darkness was like in the countryside. And also, too, as well, I mean, it always sounds a cliche when you start it, but it's also a time without radio, without television, without telephones, without any sort of other extraneous noise. You just simply, it's you, it's the wind, and it's the night.
And that is something that we rarely experience now. I mean, it's fair to say where I live, we get a hint of it. But even living in a fairly remote place like Lamode, there's still lights that we see shining around the place, and certainly the large glow of light coming from Douglas and indeed from Castletown disturb the darkness. I guess thinking about or experiencing the conditions of that kind of darkness where you really couldn't be sure what you were seeing and what was there. That the fact that no longer exists is probably as much to do with why fairies have disappeared as the fact that we speak English rather than Manx.
Also, too, you have to remember that people who were going out in the dark would have been in farmhouses listening to stories about them. And the Folklife Survey makes that plain. In fact, that there are reminiscences in the Folklife Survey of people who go to, and it must have been remarkable. I think it's very difficult for us, even as a folklorist, who I work with this material day in, day out, to try and sort of project yourself back to what it must have been like. At Craignish, we say, with Edward Farragher, you're there in the 1890s. As you say, it's dark. All you would have would be a turf fire. You don't have candlelight, by the way. That's always a cliche when people say, everyone lived with candlelight. When you read the Gow's reminiscences, he says everyone had rushlights. Candles were reserved for when you had guests. When it was almost like a marker of hospitality that people would come in. You needed more light when you had more people there. This would just be a simple rushlight, just tapped in oil. And you have that light glowing. You have the fire, you have the chollag going, and you have someone telling you fairy, and it's not just legends, not just stories about the fairy folk. It's stories about Bugans, a story about the Fenoddery. It's stories about all of the sort of that whole panoply of the whole pantheon of mythological creatures. And then you go home in that. You go home as a pair, which is great when you're a pair, as long as you don't come across a fairy house. And then you come across as a pair, and then you're on your own. And there are those people who are led astray with the three-cornered field where they go over the hedge and they can't find the way out. When they go over the hedge, they're back in the field again. So the night is the night is not there for danger; it's there for terror almost. But there are cases, and back to these sessions that we know did take place, that we don't seem to have that notion of the Cayley House as you do have in Ireland and particularly in Scotland. But we definitely know that there were storytelling sessions in Manx farmhouses.
Sadly, we'll have to talk about that in the second hour because we are running out of time. We had the red hot chili peppers in. I've gone instead for the red hot chili pipers, and this is Flower of Scotland.
Galla's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee. radio weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
And the weather in English. Let's start with the English version with Stephen Miller.
Okay, this afternoon will be bright with sunny spells and scattered showers which may turn heavy at times. Becoming dry this evening as the showers gradually die away, leaving the night dry with clear spells. The outlook: tomorrow will start dry and bright, but it will turn cold, cloudy during the morning before rain arrives in the afternoon, becoming persistent and heavy late afternoon and early evening.
Yndysach. Bí a geall fasta dúla Shelan Greenock as frasna gev is troben na Caton for the bí gia nia meenach on leis and temperele smooth Craig Celsius jeg bí a chirum sanasta beg herdsvis na frasens lo chail began a vegan as bí a chirum nach le Shelan yo vajlach bí gia nia as fes na meenach on as an temperele slow jai Celsius and rate bí a chirum as geall sa tajak merach och higga the ve bajlach caravora rosh me vis flia chit rish sanasta vis troben as bí shia flia on na samma sanasta as sanasta beg. Ní an gia chin there the hit fain jas na sheeras as nyatig agus bjorn and nyatal temperele smooth care Celsius jeg. Ní an flia vis fos on eg madran gemert slow chail the gerard as esh be and le a man chirum le Shelan Greenock chit rish. Irina grania 3 minute jeg gerish queg merach as line grania dev in a jeg roast jai jew.
The Manx Glass and Glazing showroom is currently closed for TT and will reopen on Monday the 9th of June. Galla's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
I sit and wait. There's an angel contemplate my fate. And do they know the places where we go when we're gray and old? 'Cause I have been told that salvation lets their wings unfold. So when I'm lying in my bed, thoughts running through my head, and I feel that love is dead, I'm loving angels instead. And through it, oh, she offers me protection, a lot of love and affection, whether I'm right or wrong, and down the waterfall, wherever it may take me, I know that life won't break me. When I come to call, she won't forsake me. I'm loving angels instead. When I'm feeling weak and my pain walks down a one-way street, I look above and I know I'll always be blessed with love. And as the feeling grows, she breathes flesh to my bones. Oh, when love is dead, I'm loving angels instead. And through it, oh, she offers me protection, a lot of love and affection, whether I'm right or wrong, and down the waterfall, wherever it may take me, I know that life won't break me. When I come to call, she won't forsake me. I'm loving angels instead. forsake me. I'm loving angels instead.
There we go. That's Robbie Williams with Angels. And yes, well, we have with us a special guest in the studio, Stephen Miller, a folklorist. And Stephen, you have a question from Andy. Andy asks, please, what was the story of the little people at Ballalise and the missing lady?
Oh, this is the lost wife of Ballalise. This is a wonderful fairy legend. This is a case where the woman goes missing. They're married, and the wife goes missing, and after many years, the husband decides to remarry, and he has a second wife, and then appearing to him in a dream as his first wife, and she's gone missing because she is in fairyland. But there is a chance that she can be released, that she can come back to the world of mortals. And what will happen is that one day the fairy cavalcade will come through the barn at Ballalise, and there will be a chance for him to take her away from fairyland back to our land, back to our world, by just simply grabbing on to the bridle of her horse. However, the barn must be swept clean, and there must be not a wisp of straw in the barn. And so what happens is that the second wife hears of this and knows of this and decides to put a spoke in the works. And indeed what so happens, it is indeed happens one night. The doors of the barn are open. The fairy cavalcade comes through. There is his wife on the horse, and he runs forward, grabs the bridle, and then she says, no. Alas, there is a straw in the barn, and what there is underneath a bucket is there is a wisp of straw put there by the second wife, and that is it. She is away in fairyland forever.
Gosh, that's a nasty trick from the second wife, I guess.
That is indeed, and maybe it's one of these cautionary tales about marrying again. Maybe if you marry once and you lose your partner, lose your wife, whatever it is, you should be content to simply stay that way, to stay a widow man, and that's it. There's also another saga, it's another great story too, at Markley Kew, where the fairy folk steal the bride-to-be. I mean, it's very unusual that the fairies, one thing about fairy beliefs, they're consistent and inconsistent. We know about fairy changelings, and we know that fairies like unborn children, but as long as they're baptised, the fairies can't take them. But then, of course, you then hear about children at being sent out at night with soot on their face. And that seems to be another way to stop this. So they at various times it's children, at other times it's sort of young girls, and then at other times it is, as I say, it's just us mortals. I think that's the thing about the fairy. We don't know where we are with them. And in this particular case at Markley Kew, they take the wife, and the locals know where they've gone to. They go to the fairy mound. We know about the fairy hill. The fairy hill is not the only fairy mound in which they live, and they go there and they threaten to dig it up. They say that because they know that's where she must be. She must be in the fairy mound. And then one of the fairy folk appears and sort of says things like, if you don't dig our mound up, but if you turn your back so you don't see the entrance to the mound, we will give it back to you. And that's the way they get back.
I guess if the bride doesn't turn up for the wedding, some yarn about the fairies having taken her sounds a little bit more acceptable than actually she didn't actually want to get married in the first place.
Remarkably, you should say that. There's an account in the newspapers of a pair who were going to sail for America, except he made it to the boat and she didn't. She either got cold feet or decided life in America would not be for her, and her argument was that the fairy folk had detained her.
Which is fair enough, I suppose. Well, yes, there's a couple of texts into the programme. Graham says, really love I love the Red Hot Chili Pipers, always have. They give the pipes a bit of welly, pure class. And then, what's the other one? The other one is from Robert, who asks, Robert always comes up with some remarkably interesting, cryptic perhaps, phrases that he wants me to translate into Manx, and he asks, what is seafront crawling down the telephone in Gilg? That is quite a challenge, it's fair to say, because I'm not entirely sure what it means in English. However, my attempt is Ronachan Aina Mara Snew Shis a Chelvain. So Ronachan is verses. Aina Mara is the front of the sea front. And then snew is also used for swimming, but snew means creeping or crawling as well. So snew shis a Chelvain, swimming or crawling down the Chelvain, the phone. And of course there was before the translation Chelvain was made. The old Manx used to talk about the Chachta Bew, which is the Manx for the swift messenger. They were great with their names. The other one, of course, they had for a car was the Mullina Jowl, the Devil's Mill, which yes, they were less well, not particularly fans of the cars in those days. Anyway, time for a piece of music, and this is One Republic and a song called Invincible.
Making the island feel good. This is Manx Radio.
Round and round we go. Where we stop, nobody knows. In the end, we lose control. But right now, we're invincible. Heard you were lost in a plastic dream. Bought every lie from the TV screen. And now you don't even know what it means. They sold you lies, baby, oh no, no. The glitter don't shine like it did before. You never really find what you're searching for. In this life, are we something more? Or are we just a number? Round and round we go. Where we stop, nobody knows. In the end, we lose control. But right now, we're invincible. 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 Please tell me what's the motivation. I think it's twisting me out. Is there some higher revelation? Don't know what it's all about. The glitter don't shine like it did before. You never really find what you're searching for. In this life, are we something more? Or are we just a number? Round and round we go. Where we stop, nobody knows. In the end, we lose control. But right now, we're invincible. 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 Dancing 'cause we buzzing, we loving this, don't know nothing. Yeah, we on our way to try to be something, that's something, so yeah, we okay. Dancing 'cause we buzzing, we loving this, don't know nothing. But we trying to get a little bit of something, then we gonna go and live it on a replay. The glitter don't shine like it did before. But right now we're invincible. The glitter don't shine like it did before. But right now we're invincible. Invincible.
Session and Nation Radio Finance.
Guller's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
And that was Robin Hugh Bowen with a suitably titled piece of music, Hen Aylwood, or Aylwood, I think it is. And that means in Manx, in Manx it would mean the Chalach, the old Chalach, and Shen Chalach, or the old fireplace. Which does seem appropriate for the sort of discussions we're having about folklore with Stephen Miller. I don't know where will we go next. Well, perhaps we should talk, because if we don't, we'll maybe forget. What is it that you're working on at the moment?
I was struck by a mention by Feltham, who was one of these, these what we call the tour writers. I mean, his tour through the Isle of Man in 1797 and 1798. There's a wonderful line where he says, "In remote parishes like Bride, the service is generally in the Manx language, in some English once a month, in others alternatively." And so I was quite struck there about, this is obviously not as an impressionistic, this is a clear report of what's going on in Bride. You can see, I think, Feltham, when he says in remote parishes like Bride, it really is. It's the northernmost parish that we have. It's the one that is remote from the Anglicizing influence of Castletown, as you would think. That I think Feltham is clearly struck there that nevertheless, Manx is still there, but in other particular parishes, English is now being used in church service. And he actually tells us here about Germany. He tells us about Peel here. The church in which the service is alternatively performed in Manx and English, before 1766 or thereabouts, English service was performed only once a month. So you can see that English is starting to come in. As I mentioned, this is very much an impressionistic account. But what we do have, and I was just intrigued, just one of those chance readings of an article in the Journal of the Manx Museum that pointed out the parochial visitations had questions about the usage of Manx. The parochial visitation, normally every 10 years, but in the Isle of Man seemed to be much more regular than that, I think largely because we have such a turnover of bishops. Bishop turns up, needs to find out what's the state, in many ways the literal state of the church, what is the material state of the church. Mostly broken seats and the roof needs repairing, but also to what is the spiritual state of the church. And there are two articles they ask. There's Article 9, where they ask is, how often do you preach in the Manx tongue? And there's Article 10, which asks what language are the children taught their prayers and catechism in. And so there are 10 of these available to us, quite a remarkable number. The earliest we have is 1757, and it goes up to 1835. So we can chart the progress, the attitudes towards the Manx language, and you can already see that. For instance, this I'm just reading here, this is from 1757 here. This is St. George's Chapel. Do you preach in Manx? Never in Douglas Chapel, but always when I go to the country to serve any church there. Places like Andra still, generally in Manx, but seldom in English. But other places you can start to see it's once a month always, and sometimes every other Sunday. So you can already see languages, even at this early date, is under pressure. But I think what is perhaps much more telling is when you look at Article 10 about the language the children are being taught, their prayers and their catechism here. Here you have Michael. The person who teaches our schools is an English gentlewoman who does not understand the Manx and consequently can't teach them in that language. You have to think, you start thinking, okay, you can see it happening. You start thinking, hang on, this is Michael, 1757. You're an English woman, you're an English speaker only. How do you survive in Michael? It's clearly possible for you now to not need to be bilingual. Maybe she has some smattering of Manx, but nevertheless that you can actually... And likewise, again, Lizard, the master of the parish school at Lizard Church and the master of the school at Sulby are both foreigners. And therefore unable to teach in Manx.
We'll carry on with this conversation shortly.
As Manx as the Royal Show. Manx Radio.
Manx Radio. Station and Nation Radio Finance.
And that's our cue for a Manx track. But before we do that, a very brief weather forecast. Be Gial fastagiu le Shallan Greenach as Frasnagevas Troben the Keaton for the Be a chirum san aasta beg houds vis na frassenslo cheel beg na vegen as be a chirum nach le shallan new vodgelach as ons burl.
This afternoon will be bright with sunny spells and scattered showers which may turn heavy at times, becoming dry this evening as the showers gradually die away, leaving the night dry with clear spells.
And our Manx track today is A Wren Suri by Ruth Kegan.
Galla's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
Ach sjolan sa darkus kan vägen en ratai Vaiden galgas na hanigen is krankars en trai En fljailia hare mas med leken en gasgal Oh shimmerilja bjare tamilu a hjau Na javu ek na hanigen der vaina krau Mach jassen jes vik vlogas drakat landa lach Hol jejen en jerude der vakken spenne gwell Snaggery en kraken jema jonten bolera fastui grandma cry as my jack malika sumi stach the farms of no day the cash finish noch for road to me de grejen en leke stak ut of fissem zenisha Madame Habata was a welcome jay Sen ruva mi smanjachten den heel weg maar I had de brek met de brekje hebben met zijn ben en nou mi galt de fuze me hatch na sin besen hagi je chanel caries en kilos me wel dus vergen hoe kraaien me short in de der oh de brek na de brekje hebben met zijn ben en nou mi galt de fuze me hatch na sin besen hagi je chanel caries en kilos me wel dus vergen hoe kraaien me short in de der.
And that was Ruth Kegan Gale with A Wren Suri, the courting song. And a particular favourite of mine, that one. It's a great song. All about courting in the winter time, and your feet are dragged through the mud, and you're tapping on the window pane outside, waiting to be allowed in, and eventually your sweetheart takes pity on you, and they all live happily ever after, as often happens. Well, not actually, it doesn't happen that often in Manx songs, but occasionally happens in Manx songs. Anyway, enough prattling on from me. Stephen, you were telling us about I suppose the decay of the Manx language.
Not decay. I think what is remarkable about Manx is that it's been under pressure from a very early period. You can see here from, Felton being surprised here. You get here, looking here at the parochial visitation of 1786 now, just move slightly on here. And this is about, as I say, what are the children being taught in? And we have Andrus. In Bishop Hildesley time they did, i.e. in Manx, but for some years past the children are more frequently instructed in English. Bride, they're generally taught in English. Lazaire, the schoolmaster of this parish, not being a native, only teaches his scholars their prayer and catechism in the English tongue. And then, of course, what you get here is one here from Concan. The schoolmaster here does not teach the children Manx, but as much English as possibly he can, agreeable to the request of their parents. And yet from Braddon, the wardens complain here there's no master or mistress capable of teaching the Manx language. Santon, the master teaches the children to say their prayers and catechism in Manx. We know from this period, we know from 1722, as part of one of the parochial visitations, Bishop Wilson has a head count done of the Isle of Man. We're talking about just over 17,000 people. In this period, you'd also have to include the various Scottish merchants, those in the running trade, the English merchants, so on and so on. So the numbers of native Manx, very, very small in number. And the language under pressure from that early date. And yet, in our lifetimes, we still had native speakers. And I'm not going to get into the whole argument about, native speakers. I mean, Ned Madrell, was still able to speak Manx. So it resisted. So, I think that the Manx language really should not be, not picking you up on that, not really a situation of decay, but a situation of resistance.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to be picked up. The decline, perhaps, in use of Manx would have been a better way of framing that question. And that is the remarkable thing about it, isn't it? That we have now, according to the various census results, around 2,000 speakers of Manx. Even at its height. There wouldn't have been that many more. Maybe 10 times that number would have been the most Manx speakers there would have been. And of course, this was because our language effectively came from. Well, you could argue where it came from, but was the same as what was being spoken in certainly the Scottish Islands, and at one time similar to what was spoken in Ireland. Anyway, we will come back to that, but we mustn't neglect the music, and apparently the boys are back in town, so Thin Lizzy is telling us.
Change had much to say, but man, I still think them cats are crazy. They were asking if you were around, how you was, where you could be found. I told them you were living downtown, driving all the old men crazy. The boys are back in town, boys are back in town. I said, the boys are back in town. Chick that used to dance a lot, every night she'd be on the floor shaking what she'd got. Man, when I tell you she was cool, she was red hot. I mean, she was steaming. And that time over at Johnny's place, well, this chick got up and she slapped Johnny's face. Man, we just fell about the place. If that chick don't wanna know, forget her. The boys are back in town, the boys are back in town. I said, the boys are back in town. Spread the word around. Guess who's back in town? You spread the word around. Friday night they'll be dressed to kill down at Dino's Bar and Grill. The drink will flow and blood will spill. And if the boys wanna fight, you better let them. That jukebox in the corner blasting out my favorite song. The nights are getting warm. summer comes. Now that the boys are here again. The boys are back in town, boys are back in town. The 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 boys are back in town. Spread the word around. The boys are back in town. The boys are back in town. The boys are back. The boys are back. The boys are back in town again. Been hanging down at Delos. The boys are back in town again.
We were talking. I was being rebuked, which was quite right. We were talking about the resistance in relation to the continuation of the Manx language, and that in fact from effectively the 18th century, English was being taught, and partly as a kind of a philosophy from preachers and bishops and various people from across who had come to the island and decided we would all be far better off if we spoke a language that they could understand. And this seems to have been quite a repetitive theme, whether that be bishops or the Wesleys when the Methodist introduction to the island. There was a strong feel that actually Manx was a hindrance rather than a benefit.
Well, you have that with John Wesley when there's the Methodist conference and they're asking about whether they should have hymns translated into Manx or sung in Manx. But they did. In many ways, it is the Methodist chapels that were the last bastions of the particular language. Even Feltham notices this when he says, in this and most other parishes, he says there's a place of worship. Here I heard an English sermon delivered with animated elocution and one in Manx by a native, no less fervent and devout. And he's talking here about Methodists. And we know that often some of the last places where Manx was used in that sort of environment, not in a sort of a home daily conversation environment, but where it was heard, was in the chapel. I'd say, as we were talking about it, I think instead of talking about the decay of Manx, which languages are always under pressure, and I think also too when you can see there of parents asking their children to be taught in Manx, taught in English rather, is that people are not sentimental about languages. Languages to them is how do you get on in the world? And if English is the language in which you get on in the world, then that's what you want your children to get on with. It's only later on with figures, and certainly figures such as Sophia Morrison, such as Otti Gaccan, and those others who sort of thought, well, we're losing something here. This is a badge of Manxness. This is something that makes us different, and that is something that we really should cherish. And I think it is all to these particular figures who there was that great one when Sophia Morrison sort of complains to Rhoda, when Rhoda started saying things like, I'm not doing any more Manx notes and queries, you're not interested in what I'm doing. And Morrison just says, we're always going to have buckets of cold water thrown over us. And that's what she said, buckets of cold. You just simply carry on doing it. And thank God that she did, and thank God that she and Otti Gaccan did, because it's well worth remembering that it's the Peel Manx Language Association that publishes first lessons in Manx. That is not done by the Manx Language Society. That comes out of Peel, that comes out of Sophia Morrison, and that comes out of Otti Gaccan.
And of course, it continues. We have. I suppose now it's Culture Vannon is at the forefront of the work that's done to support and promote the Manx language, but there are obviously other organisations. Obviously, Munjavega is one which is wholly focused at teaching English-speaking children to speak a bit of Manx, which is an excellent conversion from the 18th century when it was the other way around.
And I think we also need to remember not just people who worked on the language, but people who worked on the folklore and the folk life as well. When you look at the folk life survey, when you look at people like Grace Mary Quilliam, who just was the linchpin behind that survey. You have Anna Berishnikov, you have Ethel Flanagan, you have Chelsea Crane, you have the Braid brothers, the great Leslie Quirk, trained by the Irish Folklore Commission, comes back to the island, works as part of the survey. Pi Killip, all of these figures, Zyla Sale, Basil McGaw, Eric Regine, all of these figures who were also concerned that the island was, you can either say it's losing something, or rather, even if it's not being lost, it needs to be documented. It needs to be remembered. It needs to be there for future generations to look back on and go to someone like Craig Nish and say, okay, I can see the cottages, I can see the thatch, I can see this, but what went on here? What went on in the fields here? What went on in the seas around here? And for that, we need the memories of those who have now gone.
Well, I have teased the listener with a little bit of the start of Status Quo. We're now going to hear the whole of that piece of music, and this is Down, Down, and a kind of, we're towards the end of TT Fortnight, but there's always time for a bit of Status Quo.
well as Gaccan. Brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
There we are. That was Status Quo with Down Down. And we're into our last little section now. And we were talking while that music was playing about Neddy Beghamroy, otherwise known as Edward Farragher. And he was a tremendous source of folklore, wasn't he?
He was an absolutely amazing character. I mean, he was befriended at some date by Karl Roeder. Roeder was a German national living and working in Manchester. And often you talk about these people as being, should we say, collectors and informants, but I think very much, and I don't think it's being presentist, to see them very much as collaborators. And they were great friends as well, because Farragher was not earning a lot. He had to go. He was still involved in the Kinsale fishing, but that was starting to drop off in this particular period. And Roeder would send him tobacco. He would send him money orders. He would send him books as well. And later, when he moved, a great sadness to leave Cregneash and move to a mining village in Derbyshire, that Roeder would send him the Isle of Man Examiner every week. And so it was only by having the Examiner come through the post that he knew that Roeder was still alive. But what he did for Roeder was, and what he did for us as well, was to collect a remarkable amount of fairy lore. And very curiously enough, there's a conference coming up very soon, because there is a publication by a similar thing, an Icelandic fisherman, a wonderful guy called Olafur Svinsson. Apologies if I've mispronounced that. 1761 to 1845, who was also believed in fairies and elves and wrote a treatise about it. There's a 140-page manuscript that is being published, and there's a conference coming up about this, and I'm going to give a paper on Edward Farragher, because the parallels here are so clear. The Icelandic folk have a very, very, very strong belief in elves and fairies. We as Celtic folk have a very strong belief in elves and fairies as well. They're both fishermen, but they're also both insiders to the culture as well. All these other collectors come from without. Arthur Moore, even on the island, was an outsider to the culture. Roeder was an outsider to the culture, and so on. Farragher, and equally important too as well, William Cashan. These are figures from inside the culture, born in it and brought up in it. And they also give us the great insights into the particular culture as well. They see it passing. I mean, this is Farragher here in 1897, writing to Roeder here now. I think I cannot pick up any more fairies' tales, as the old people who knew about them are all gone, and few of the young ones that believe in fairies, but the world is gone to be very unfaithful, and there are many that don't believe even the Bible in these days. People are getting enlightened. And you can see that the two great sources of authority, your afterlife is the Bible, your life now is the fairy folk.
Yeah.
They set the rules by which we should live. I don't tell you how to behave, but the fairy folk tell you how to behave. You don't swear, you don't cheat, you don't steal. You be kind, you be hospitable. And this is what they teach us. And so, yes, so Farragher just left us so much behind. And this is in his letters to Roeder. It's in his notebooks. There are these wonderful notebooks up there in the Manx Museum Library, where you see that Roeder sends him these notebooks. He fills them in with also a lot of his poetry as well. He's also very keen to record his experiences of life in Cregneash through his poetry as well. And then what happens is Roeder gets these notebooks. What Roeder doesn't quite understand, or perhaps wants to have more understanding about, more knowledge about, he writes a little question at the top of a page and sends these notebooks back to Farragher, and Farragher then fills them in. And there's times he has to tell him, Captain Drigg was an Irish fairy, he's not a Manx fairy, There's this sort of note of tut, don't you know this? Haven't I told you this? But the amount of material, just back there, we had that question here about asking about, what language did the fairy folk speak? And Farragher tells us. The woman that keeps the shop in Cregneash was telling me this morning that she heard the fairies in the garden again, but not understand their language. Very likely they are speaking the Manx language yet, and there is very few can understand them.
Well, sadly, that's all we've got time for. So I do hope that you'll come back, and you've chosen a piece of Manx folk music, Ellen Vannon by the Bee Gees.
its busy cares have flown. I will sit beneath the starlight with a weary heart alone. Then it rises like a vision, sparkling bright it shines for me. My own dear Ellen Manning, with its green hills by the sea. Let me hear the ocean murmur. Let me watch your stormy sky. Man above the emerald waters, sing the seagull as she flies. Then rising like a vision, sparkling bright it shines for me. My own dear Ellen Manning, with its green hills by the sea. And in all my times of sorrows, and on some lonely shore, I'll go back to Ellen Manning, to my childhood days.